Welcome into the first bonus episode of the offseason for Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Pulo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Pulo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. Now, just to be clear, we're still going to be doing bonus episodes throughout the offseason, but today we're just going to be putting a bow on the 2024 season and take a look at some next steps for the Astros as they prepare for free agency and to retool their roster for the 2025 season. Do us a favor now, click like on the video, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and really important, click the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new bonus content drops, because YouTube is very mean to us when we scale back the amount of episodes we do. Don't let the gatekeepers at Google keep you from catching every episode during the off season. When big news drops, we'll be rolling out new episodes, and on occasions, we'll even be going live to react to news, and we want you to be there. Gents, we've had some time to digest the unfortunate and perhaps premature end to this season. In the end, the thing that bit them the hardest in the biggest moments was Houston's inability to push runs across the plate, which had plagued them for most of the season. For today's conversation, we're going to focus acutely on offense. GM Dana Brown had a tall task at the deadline to fill holes. He chose to trade for Yusei Kikuchi, which certainly worked out well in the short term. The long-term ramifications, we'll see. He also traded for Caleb Ferguson, which did not work out as well. I think the three of us agree that Dana Brown did a good job this season, but in hindsight, how much did not bringing in another bat haunt them when it's all said and done?
It's tough to fill every need when you're up against a deadline. You have limited trade resources to put in play. I don't think anyone should have any regret about the Kikuchi acquisition. I don't view it as robbing Peter to pay Paul. Right? The starting rotation was leaking. They had those long stretches of games without days off, 18, 18, and 16. Verlander being either injured or a mess. The workloads for Brown and Blanco. And if they don't add Kikuchi, maybe they don't wind up winning the division, getting to the playoffs. Right? He performed admirably to phenomenally in all 10 of his regular season starts. The Astros won 9 of the 10. He was a difference maker in a rotation that needed it. That said, a B12 shot for the offense was warranted also. The lineup depth was just not good. Jeremy Pena hit cleanup for this team 29 times during the 2024 season. Another 57 games, he was in the 5 slot. Jeremy Pena is a bottom of the order hitter in an optimal lineup. John Singleton did some good work, but no one thinks of John Singleton as a major league 4 or 5 hole hitter. The absence of Kyle Tucker obviously punched a huge hole for half the season, but the issues went beyond that. There was only so much within grasp for Dana Brown to pursue, and I think they reasonably prioritized the starting pitcher as the most pressing need. You know, you look at the raw statistics, Astros top 5 in runs scored in the American League, top 5 in batting average and on base percentage and slugging percentage. But you add it up, they were way too feast or famine. Right? We talked over the course of the season. They were a terrible come from behind late innings team, not one time rallying to win when down after 8 innings. And the biggest issue I think they need to address offensively, along with just a talent infusion if they can make it, batter discipline. You know, I mentioned some of the overall numbers were good. Well, here's one that stunk. 3rd fewest walks drawn in the American League, with even just an average number of bases on balls drawn. That much more traffic, that much more opportunity, that many more big innings, at least potentially. Alex Bregman's walk rate dropped 45% this year. Jose Altuve's down over a third. Pena never walks, less than once per week on average. Ditto Yainer Diaz. Mauricio Dubon, 400 at-bats. The guy swings to the first pitch way too often for a guy who's not a really potent hitter. And Dubon, 15 walks and 400 at-bats. Much too much of that for the Astros to have a truly powerful batting order.
Yeah, I'm with Charlie on that. And Dana Brown talked about it. They got to change this approach a little bit. I get it. If you're facing the elite of the elite, you know, just somebody throwing 105 miles an hour, nasty breaking stuff. Sure, it makes sense if you can get a fastball early to try and take a swing at it. But not everybody is an ace level type pitcher like that. So the other thing, when you swing early, you're taking all the ability to screw up away from the pitcher. If you don't get to a 3-2 count, you don't even give him the opportunity to miss with a pitch and walk you. If you don't work a later account, you don't give him the opportunity to hang a slider that maybe you can hit over the wall. So it's just, they have to clean this up. And Altuve's been doing it. Charlie mentioned it. Bregman's not walking nearly as much. I think the strategy has to come into play here. It's not working. And it goes back to Kyle Tucker's been doing this for a few years in the postseason. How's that been working? Tucker's not performing well the last 2 postseasons, and he's trying to hunt fastballs early in the count, and it's not working. So they're going to have to change that up for sure. And as far as the trading, I understand going for the pitching. You had a big hole in your rotation, and they were like, we're waiting for Verlander to come back, and that didn't really work out. It's a good thing they went and got Kikuchi, but people were upset with what they traded for him. Imagine what they would have said if they went out and gave up a bunch more prospects for a bat, which they don't really have a lot of that. And that's the other problem. There's not a lot coming up from within the system that's ready to go right now and make an impact, at least not that we've seen so far. So they've got some big issues here because they need another bat desperately. And that's even if they keep Bregman, they need another bat. The hole with Jose Abreu left really hurt them. And as we look at some of the options, and we'll get into it later, I won't hit on that completely right here. A lot of those options to maybe plug first base and free agency, man, they're all guys in their 30s, some of them in their mid to late 30s. I feel like you made that mistake with Abreu. Don't make that same mistake again.
And just to hammer one more nail on the draw a few walks issue, Kyle Tucker, right? We know about all the Astros pitching injuries. The lineup was pretty darn healthy, right? Except for Tucker. Bregman missing 6 to 10 games last month of the season with the elbow. Other than that, the Astros' everyday players, right? Caratini had a short stay on the injured list. It was a healthy lineup. Tucker missed half the season injured. Only Yordan Alvarez drew more bases on balls this year than Kyle Tucker.
Charlie, you know, when Espada and Brown were talking about the offensive identity, I clipped that quote and sent it to you. Brown said they're going to preach getting back to having quality at bats. And I clipped that and sent it to you and said, would have been cool if they'd had that conversation this year, perhaps even before the playoffs. I don't know why it's, they're going to use this offseason to do that, but it's, yes, amen. I think the three of us have talked about that for throughout the season. Not being patient with the bat not only takes away opportunities for the starter to throw bad pitches, as Josh mentioned, but you also make it that much easier for the opposition to cruise and to have more in the tank later in the game. If a pitcher can get through an inning with 5 or 7 pitches, like all that does is it, brings out your starter quicker and then leaves bullets in the chamber for the opposition. Now, just a reminder, before we move on here, if you're a Texans fan, the three of us do a Texans podcast called Texans on Tap. We're live after every game. If you missed our reaction to Bills Texans, you can find that over on our other YouTube channel, Sports About Texans, or in audio form on all your favorite podcast apps. Just search Texans on Tap. We'll be doing a Texans Patriots preview on Thursday, so keep an eye out for that. Getting back to Brown, when he was asked what his biggest offseason task would be, he told the media that their goal is to get back deep into the postseason, and they aren't taking anything off the table, whether it's making trades or sign a free agent. Obviously, the biggest free agent question around this team right now is Alex Bregman. Guys, I don't remember Jose Altuve so vocally lobbying to retain either George Springer or Carlos Correa in the same way that he's putting it out there for Alex Bregman. Bregman really took on a team leader position this season, working with the pitchers to give his perspective on pitch usage, being very vocal during meetings at the mound. For a team that has lost so many locker room leaders over the past few seasons, like guys like Maldi and Brantley and on, putting aside his elite defense at the hot corner, how tangible of a loss would Bregman be to this team?
I wouldn't be unduly worried about the leadership stuff. There are enough guys who've been through multiple rodeos here. Jim Crane should either be annoyed with or dismissive of Jose Altuve, repeatedly saying, we have to bring back, I can't believe we wouldn't bring back Brady. Give him whatever he wants. Well, unless Jose's offering, say, a $10 million per year rebate on his $25 million per extension that kicks in next season, right? No one could go after Jim Crane for being cheap if they let Bregman walk or Bregman just chooses to go elsewhere. Right? The Astros carried the third highest payroll in the sport this year. And really for the first time in this era, ultimately Jim Crane did not get good return on investment. Right? The Astros weren't close to the third best team in baseball. Then there's Bregman's age. He turns 31 the third day of the season. 2024 was the worst full and healthy season of Alex Bregman's career. We mentioned the walk numbers way down. He's a mid 400 slugging guy. He's a good player, but he's not a superstar and hasn't been for 5 years now. So to go 5-6 years on that contract, I mentioned in the column last week that George Springer was clearly a better player his last 2 seasons with the Astros than Alex Bregman has been the last 2 seasons with the Astros. George Springer's contract right now for the Blue Jays is a mess, with 2 years and $50 million remaining on it as he's 34 years old and been in clear decline for 2 years. Now, maybe 2024 was a hiccup for Bregman, and he gets his numbers back to where they were the couple of prior seasons, which weren't great, but were clearly better than they were in 2024. The Astros payroll without Bregman, without Kikuchi, as it counts toward the collective bargaining agreement and the competitive balance tax, they're near $230 million. The first tax cut in 2025 is $241. Right? The Astros would be a repeater, so the penalty would be increased. $261 is the second tier, where the penalty grows even harsher. If you're re-signing Bregman, and let's say it's a mere $25 million per year, well, you blow past that first number, you're within $7-8 million of the second number, you still have a starting pitcher to add. They can go cheap the last couple bullpen spots, the last couple spots on the roster, and try to trim around the margins. But I think Dana Brown has some payroll juggling to do, but it's Jim Crane who's going to set the tone. And we won't go heavily into this because time reasons. But does Jim Crane say, we still have a contending team, we have a nucleus, my operating income, year-to-year profits to losses, I'm a billionaire, I still don't like frittering away money, but if I eat $10 million this year, $15 million next year, and I step out a little more on Bregman and or Kikuchi, that's okay because I paid $610 million for the franchise. I could easily quadruple my money selling it. The Astros are worth $2.5 billion plus. I don't know what Crane's mentality is on this, but if they don't cave to Scott Boras's demands, right, the stupid Matt Chapman contract need not be the template for the Astros. Jose Ramirez is a much better player than Alex Bregman. He's been a better player 5 years in a row. Jose Ramirez signed 5 years, $124 million, an extension with the Guardians a couple of years ago. So if Boras is going to throw Chapman's overpriced, desperate Giants deal in I'll go Jose Ramirez. Here's a guy who's been a better player 5 years running. Here's what he took. Yes, a couple of years ago, but MLB revenues haven't tripled in the last 2 years. Let me just mention this. Bregman obviously has been a tentpole player and a pillar during this magnificent era. But there's some mythology that he's some postseason god. He's played in 99 postseason games and been an integral part of the Astros getting there and performing in them. But, over 7 American League Championship Series, Alex Bregman's a 195 hitter. In 4 World Series, he's a 198 hitter. He's gone nutso in the division series, 333 OPS over 1,000. But LCS and World Series, he's a sub-700 OPS guy. Has he had a couple of huge hits? Of course, for all eternity, the game winner in Game 5 against the Dodgers. Well, if you're in the middle of the lineup and you play 99 games, I presume you're going to mix in a big hit here or there. Martin Maldonado had a couple of notable postseason hits in his time here. So that if Alex Bregman is gone, the Astros are losing just an utterly indispensable leader, he stammered, and a guy who's just been relentless money in the postseason. No, he hasn't.
You know who I think is pretty happy that Altuve's speaking out about Bregman? Scott Boras. They have the same agent. So there might be a little bit of, help a brother out over here. I'm looking for a contract and we work for this, or the same agent works for both of us. I think that's part of it. But offense-wise, everything you need to know. In that 2-game series against the Tigers, they had 1 run in the first 15 innings of that 2-game series. That's not going to get it done. And that's with Bregman in your lineup, and you still couldn't put the runs on the board. So, and especially if you're Jim Crane and you're looking across the field at AJ Hinch and all those young Tigers players, not a ton of big name guys over there that Pete, they beat you pretty soundly. So I wonder if Jim Crane's thinking, they didn't have Alex Bregman and we had him and we weren't able to beat them. And I mean, what did the Astros lead that series? Maybe for a half an inning? I mean, it was a pretty sound butt kick in there. So if I'm Jim Crane, I'm maybe thinking maybe we go a little younger here. Maybe having this bloated payroll isn't going to guarantee us anything moving forward. I think that's something that he's going to have to be thinking about. So, and if you're Jose Altuve, I think it's a little easier to speak out and say, sign this guy after you got your huge contract that's going to take you pretty much to the end of your career. I think you're going to be a little more free with your comments, knowing that you're locked up.
Charlie,
probably
you mentioned
not lost on Jim Crane on the finances of this. The Tigers' 26-man playoff roster in the series against the Astros made less money this year than Justin Verlander,
right,
and by like $15 million.
Charlie, you mentioned Crane not getting good ROI on his big payroll. I think a good example is one you just pointed out. But Crane does have, we'll call it FU money. He could throw caution to the wind and pay the tax. On the other hand, considering Abreu and Montero's money falls off the books after 2025, how likely do you think they play the long game, perhaps be more fiscally conservative next season to make bigger moves for 2026?
Yeah, at what level compromising 2025? Because they'd be a repeater in 25, but you reset and become a first-time offender if you get under the tax threshold for just one season. So again, as always, easy for us fans, anyone else to spend gobs of Crane's money and say, hey, if it's going to cost you an extra $10, $15 million in tax, just reach between a couple of your couches. You can come up with that. It's not incumbent upon him to go there. But if you're the one professing that as long as I'm around, the championship contending window is always open, there is a little bit of put your money where your mouth is for a year.
Chandler Rome notes that guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Pete Alonso could be free agent targets if Bregman walks, or if they wanted to address first base, guys like Christian Walker, Josh Bell, and Carlos Santana. These are the guys that, Josh, you talked about, being, long in the tooth and, could potentially be, Abreu 2.0 signings here. You've got these holes at both third and first that are coming open. Do you guys see these positions as being either or moves, meaning if they sign, a notable free agent at third, we see a patchwork at first, or vice versa?
I think first base is going to be on the cheap. Bregman, for all I said about he's not worth a mega long-term dollar contract for a number of reasons, you still have to fill the position. And Zach DeCenzo's their best prospect, but he's not a premium prospect. Shea Whitcomb is really not a significant prospect. He's 26 years old. However many freak show home runs in AAA he hits, leave aside his last game defensively. So what are you going to do there? Right? Bryce Matthews looked utterly overmatched at Sugarland. He's not ready yet. 6 for 42 with 19 strikeouts in his taste of AAA at the end of the season. So if not Bregman, what are you going to do there? And if third base becomes a sinkhole, well, on the other side at first base, 32-year-old John Singleton, but he doesn't have the service time because of his career arc and the well-documented story. But John Singleton will not make $1 million next season. And if you could get 2024 John Singleton, that plays in a platoon. Against right-handed pitching, Singleton was a 773 OPS guy. That's a higher OPS than Alex Bregman had in 2024. Bregman, $27 million or whatever it will take. Singleton, $1 million. So you absolutely have to have a platoon partner for him at first. Is that Diaz or Caratini when not pitching? I mean, Goldschmidt looked washed up this season until meaningless games in September when the Cardinals were out of it. 37 years old. He's from the Woodlands. If he come home for $2 million to platoon and be another one of those veteran leaders, okay. But there's no risk, at least, of a stupid Abreu contract of too many years for an older guy already in decline. But Singleton's going to be part of first base in 2025. And then you hope that he didn't overachieve in 2024 and that he's closer to the 190 whatever career hitter he was before 2024 than what he would deliver for you next season.
Yeah, I remember when Keith Law kind of had criticism to the Abreu contract, when all of us Astros fans were like, heck yeah, this is going to be great. He pointed out, like, this is something that they wouldn't have done under the old regime with James Click. Like, first base is a position, Click came from the Rays. They see first base as a position where if they have a bat in the system, they'll get that guy to be able to play some first base. It's not the position you prioritize to dump a bunch of money into. So I think the Astros would be wise to see if Singleton can hold it down against right-handed pitching. Dana Brown said nothing's off the table. I wouldn't be surprised if Yainer Diaz is going to play some first base, and Caratini's only under contract for one more year, but we know he can play over there. So I think that might be the way they do it. We have to keep in mind, though, Altuve's really declined as a defensive second baseman. He's one of the worst in baseball.
And Singleton's defensive metrics terrible.
Right. So if you put those two guys together on the right side of your infield, not exactly your best case scenario there on defense. So I think that's something you have to point out. So I'd be a little leery to do that. And then when I did bring up, like, Anthony Rizzo, he's 35 years old. Goldschmidt, he's 37. Carlos Santana, he's 38. At least Pete Alonso's 29. So I'm like, okay, he's got some good years left, but he's going to make a ton of money. So it's not going to be easy this year for Dana Brown. This is going to be a big challenge for him. And I hope they let him do it. Not a deal where he has a good idea and he has to pass Bagwell and pass Reggie Jackson and Jim Crane. And that's probably how it's going to be, but at least let him take the lead on it and just kind of, oversee it, kind of give it a, yeah, we like it or we don't. Like, let him really dig deep into this. Maybe he can find you a diamond in the rough that not everybody's talking about. And that would be huge. That's what you need to do here. You need to find a bargain, somebody that kind of surprises you and plays above what you expect from them. So, Dana, you're going to earn that paycheck this year, buddy.
Yeah, and at third base, if Alex Bregman's Astros tenure is over, just to put a couple early names in play, if Arizona does not exercise the $15 million option on Eugenio Suarez, because they're going all out for Bregman from neighboring state New Mexico and great hitters ballpark, pretty good ball club, or they just don't want to pay Suarez $15 million. As a temp for the Astros, I mean, he's a brutally high strikeout and not especially good walk guy, but good power, solid third baseman. And if you're signing him for just a year and an option, something like that, while you're hoping someone develops to become your next long-term third baseman. And a name we talked about at the trade deadline, one of the few guys not tied down that the Rays did not wind up dealing. The Astros could have a Y Diaz playing some at first in Yainer, and Yandy Diaz playing some at third and also first. He's a right-handed hitter who mauls left-handed pitching. He'd be an ideal complement to Singleton at first base, and maybe wind up the majority playing time guy at first base, subject to what Singleton does. Little leery of his defense as a regular third baseman at 33, but he's a very good offensive player. Batting champ just a couple of years ago. OPS guy over 800 fairly consistently, but presumably wouldn't be getting big long-term money. If the Rays put him in the trade market, he has 1 year, $10 million left. That would fit the Astros budget. I think it would fit their timeline at the position. But because he's 33, you're not going to be giving up a package of ultra premium prospects to acquire a guy like Yandy Diaz, which is good because the Astros don't have ultra premium prospects.
And that goes back to Josh's point, which is, the Rays having this philosophy of, oh, well, you just put a young bat at first and you can get production on the cheap. Well, you have to have a bat in your system to put at first. And the closest thing this team had was John Singleton. And he has, worked out as well as you could have hoped, and probably better than you could have hoped, considering those career numbers, Charlie, that you pointed to. And if you're talking about the defense, and Altuve's taken a step back defensively, John Singleton doesn't grade out the best defensively. Well, if you move on from Bregman and you take any sort of step back defensively at third, your entire defense could be a problem. Or your entire infield defense could be a problem. And that's one of those identities of this team throughout this run has been solid defense at most positions. And you talked about the young guys. You talked about the Zach DeZenzos and the Shea Whitcombs. You've got Jacob Melton that's down there in the farm system as well. That's, could come up. We could see him on the big roster this year, and you have to look at Jake Myers. We've seen now another full season of Jake Myers at center. How likely do you think the Jake Myers experiment continues to go on? Now, granted, defensively, he's fine, doesn't have the best arm in the world, but offensively just really struggled this season. I don't know that Jacob Melton necessarily improves you in any meaningful way at that position, but maybe it gives you the opportunity to move on via trade for, either Chaz or Myers. What kind of movements do you think we'll see in center?
I think at least one of them is out of here, meaning between Myers and McCormick. The M&M boys, not exactly Maris and Mantle, for those who remember those two guys with the Yankees back in the 60s. When the Astros are dealing with either paying the tax at one or two levels, getting below the tax, I just think is impossible for them unless they're really going to try to tear things down to an extent. Every couple million you save matters. Myers and McCormick, both salary arbitration eligible. Myers, for the first time, he projects it was, Josh, 2 and change. McCormick, 3 and change.
Correct.
Myers is a good center fielder, but Brandon, you mentioned the noodle arm. He's not Andrew Jones out there or Ken Griffey Jr. or Jim Edmonds or a whole bunch of other guys. And offensively, he was sub-pitiful the second half of the season. So if you can't find a trade partner, I mean, it's not like either guy's young. McCormick's 29. Myers is about to be 28. You just give them away or non-tender them. Jacob Melton would play for the major league minimum next season, $760,000. Well, it's a couple and a half million lower than McCormick would play for, $1.5 million or so less than Myers would play for. It's just, again, Jacob Melton's the supposed Astros #1 prospect. He had 248 at AA. They moved him up to AAA. He had 241 there with marginal power, and the peripheral numbers not all that good. So unless Jacob Melton makes an unanticipated quantum leap forward offensively, he should be better than Jake Myers, but that would be by default.
Yeah, and that's what's tough, right? Because we see these guys in AAA, like Loper Fido, where they're just blasting the ball out of the park. And then they come up to the big leagues and they kind of struggle a little bit. And Melton's not even dominating that level of competition yet. So it's hard to think that he's ready for something like this. And
he's 24 years old already. So it's not even this young phenom. No.
Right. He went to Oregon State. He wasn't somebody they drafted out of high school. So he's a little older than some of these other prospects. But when I look at those numbers, I think there is some room to shed salary. If I'm going to have to pick between Jake Myers and Chaz McCormick, like Charlie said, it's about a little over $3 million projected for Chaz this year, a little over $2 million projected for Jake. I'd rather pay that extra million and put McCormick out there. At least McCormick has shown you he can be a productive major league hitter. He's done that in his career. We've never seen that from Jake Myers. And I know it's a big center field, but I don't think Chaz is a huge problem on defense, anything like that. I think he's average, and the arm is just average, maybe a little below average, but Jake Myers doesn't have a good arm either. So I'd rather at least roll the dice on McCormick. Maybe he can bounce back, because when he did have those good years, I mean, it was really productive. And if you're getting that for $3 million, that's a steal. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Can you find somebody that really achieves over what you're paying them? And then when I look at the other projected salaries for next year, Dubon's projected to make about $4.6 million, whereas Jeremy Pena is getting a bump up to about $4.4 million. I can't justify paying both of those guys over $4 million. So I'd try and see if maybe I could, move Dubon to shed some salary, move Jake Myers to just, little moves that eventually stack up. And maybe you create enough money there that you can go get a player that you really covet.
Yeah, Dubon's a terrific guy and a team guy and does put the bat on the ball, but the overall offensive numbers are poor. The defensive versatility is outstanding. But you can cover those bets elsewhere, save a few million in the process. And what would be a boost to the Astros is if Jeremy Pena has some level of improvement in him. He's 27 years old now. And from his rookie season to going into 2025, he's essentially improved zero. He's a middling at best offensive player. I think he's still a good shortstop, though the metrics say he's declined since his rookie season, and he had that spate of errors this year where he wound up third in the league in errors. Bryce Matthews is supposed to be the Astros' second best prospect. Mentioned how he flailed at AAA, and he's not 23 years old yet, so you hope he has a breakout coming. But if it's not at shortstop, maybe it's at third base, or maybe he's toolsy enough to become a center field option. But if you're intending to be a contender in 2025, which certainly the Astros are contending to be, there would be no reason to expect Jacob Melton or Bryce Matthews to be rookie of the year candidate type players. And this was the first year in how many that the Astros had no rookie who merited showing up on any rookie of the year ballots.
Let's talk about Pena for just 1 second before we're out the door here. Charlie, you mentioned it. I mean, it's just very minimal increase. I mean, by, 3/1000th of a point in batting average, got worse for on-base percentage, slight minimal improvement in slugging, but just hasn't really taken any steps towards being a sustained version of what we saw in the 2022 postseason, which now just looks like he got hot at the right time, which, hey, cool. I mean, he'll always be a Houston legend for that run for sure. But, in the same way as we're in this place with Chas McCormick, where you're having to make uncomfortable decisions about people who've been postseason heroes for you. At what point do you think the Astros and Dana Brown pull the plug on the Jeremy Pena experiment at shortstop?
Well, I don't think we're close there. And look, he's been a legit 3-year starter. He's not dirt cheap anymore. Salary arbitration eligible for the first time, but these things are relative, right? He jumps from 800,000 basically to 4 million, a little more. No way would I want Dubon as my regular shortstop over Pena. I'm not optimistic that after 3 years, Pena is going to go where he really hasn't gone before. But where he is still better overall offensive player than Dubon, because he also has more of a speed element. Thank goodness for infield hits, where Pena's offensive numbers would really be an atrocity. So it's more disappointment that he has not become more. He's a legit major league shortstop, but he's a very middle of the pack player.
Yeah, the speed element, Charlie hit on it there. I mean, just him getting a home plate, and then that second game on that tag up from Altuve. Who else on the team could have done that? And if the bullpen does their job, then who knows what shakes out there. He does have some qualities that are really nice qualities, but with how fast he is, 20 stolen bases kind of doesn't seem that like, oh, wow. It's just kind of it's a good number, but it's not 40 stolen bases. So he's not giving you that. And I mean, 15 home runs for as big as he is, it just doesn't seem like he ever uses the Crawford boxes. I can't remember the last time he pulled a ball into the Crawford boxes. He usually hits it more straight away, or he had that really good one in the playoff series where he hit it to right center, got it to the wall there. So it doesn't feel like his swing is very well suited for the Crawford boxes, which is really unfortunate because it seems like the Astros don't capitalize on that advantage as much as they should. But I'm with Charlie. I don't think he's going anywhere. They don't have any better options. He's still at a reasonable salary. He's young enough that he could still improve. It's just, I think our expectations were so high that, that he's just kind of been about the same player every year. It's been a little disappointing, but he's still, a starting shortstop in baseball with room to improve. And, Matthews isn't ready. Who knows if Bregman's going to be here or not. So Pena's going to be your guy. He's been a Gold Glove winner. He's been a World Series MVP. And I listened to a lot of Dana Brown's interviews. He seems very like he really likes Jeremy Pena. He sees a lot of potential in him. So unless something unexpected happens, I don't think Pena is going anywhere for quite some time.
And he's been rock solid, durable over his 3 seasons. Nothing wrong with a 268, 270 batting average. But when you have 602 at bats and you walk 25 times, that's pathetic. So I'm not expecting him to evolve into a high on base percentage guy. But, if you walk even 40, 50 times, and give yourself more opportunity to take advantage of your speed, or trot around the bases. If someone behind you homers, a 308 on base percentage for an everyday player doesn't cut it.
No,
but it's the best they have clearly at this point at that position. But there's easily a dozen teams in Major League Baseball for which Jeremy Pena would not be the starting shortstop.
Yeah, and as a longtime Astros fan, I was just going to say, compared to Adam Everett, I'm not going to complain too much about Jeremy Pena with the bat.
Yeah, and you can't have mashers at every position, but plate discipline does go a long way. But the problem is if he doesn't have the eye, he just doesn't have the eye. So he may not be able to draw walks. And part of the being unable to pull pitches into the Crawford boxes may just be that he's having to wait a long time for pitches because he's trying not to get fooled by that low and away slider, which has just been his nemesis for as long as he's been in the big league. So we'll leave it there for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. Next week, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the pitching and how they can retool the pitching, just like we did on offense during this episode. Just quick shout out to everybody who watched on YouTube and listened on the podcast throughout the season. We really do appreciate your support. And we hope to see you back here on our other podcast, Texans on Tap. And until next time, go Stros.